Marcus Johnson sat in his old armchair, looking at the photos on his wall. A lifetime of memories stared back at him. His years in the Marines, the friends he had made and lost in Vietnam, the family he had raised in the small house on Cedar Street. At 82, his body wasn't what it used to be. His hand shook slightly as he reached for his coffee mug. His knees ached when it rained, but his mind was still sharp, and his eyes still missed nothing. That's why the sounds from his basement troubled him so much. It had started 3 nights ago. At first, just small scratches and thumps that he dismissed as the house settling. Then came the hums and clicks that no old pipe or heating system could make. Tonight, there was something new, a soft blue glow seeping through the cracks of his basement door. Marcus knew trouble when he saw it. He had faced enough of it in his life to recognize its shape. He reached for his phone and dialed 911. Emergency services. What's your emergency? This is Marcus Johnson at 1478 Cedar Street. I believe someone has broken into my home. Are you in a safe location, sir? I'm in my living room. The intruder seems to be in my basement. Stay where you are, sir. An officer will be there shortly. Marcus hung up and reached inside the drawer of his side table. His service pistol was still there, cleaned and maintained like he had been taught decades ago. He didn't take it out. Not yet, but knowing it was there brought comfort. 20 minutes later, a police car pulled up outside his house. The blue and red lights flashed silently, painting his front yard in alternating colors. Marcus watched through the window as a young officer stepped out of the vehicle. She was small in stature, but moved with purpose, her hand resting casually near her service weapon as she surveyed the property. The doorbell rang a moment later. Marcus opened the door carefully. Mr. Johnson, I'm Officer Kim from the County Police Department, she said, showing her badge. Her uniform was crisp, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Thank you for coming, Marcus said, opening the door wider to let her in. I know it might sound like an old man being jumpy, but there's something in my basement that ain't right. Officer Kim nodded professionally. How long have you been hearing these noises, sir? 3 nights now. But tonight, it's different. There's some kind of light coming from down there. Officer Kim's eyes narrowed slightly. Have you checked the basement yourself? No, ma'am. These old legs don't do stairs too well these days, and I thought it best to call you folks first. You did the right thing, sir, Officer Kim said. She unclipped the radio from her shoulder. Unit 347 arrived at 1478 Cedar Street for a possible break-in. The radio crackled with static, much louder than normal. Officer Kim frowned and adjusted the volume. Dispatch, do you copy? More static. Then a garbled voice. Copy. Situation. Backup. No backup needed at this time. Will advise, Officer Kim replied, but her frown deepened when more static was the only response. Marcus watched her carefully. Something wrong with your radio. Interference, she said simply. Which way to your basement, Mr. Johnson? Marcus pointed to a door at the end of the hallway. Right through there. Would you like me to come with you? I'd prefer if you stayed here, sir, for your safety. As they approached the basement door, Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The strange blue light was more visible now, seeping through the edges of the doorframe. And there was a sound, a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. Officer Kim must have felt it too. Her hand moved to her weapon, and she positioned herself carefully to the side of the door. Mr. Johnson, do you have motion sensor lights in your basement? No, just a regular light switch. She nodded, then reached for the doorknob. To both their surprise, it was ice cold to the touch despite the warm summer evening. Officer Kim drew her weapon. Sir, please step back. As Marcus moved back, her radio burst to life with a squeal of static that made them both jump. The voice that came through was distorted, barely recognizable as human speech. Unit 347. Reading. Unusual energy. Backup. Officer Kim tried to respond, but the radio went dead in her hand. At the same time, her phone began to vibrate. She glanced at it briefly, then showed it to Marcus. The screen displayed nothing but strange, shifting geometric patterns. "Sir, I think we should both step outside while I call for backup." Before Marcus could respond, the basement door swung open on its own. A wave of cold air rushed out, carrying with it the smell of ozone and something else, something alien and unfamiliar. The blue light pulsed brighter, revealing the first few steps of the basement stairs. But what caught their attention was the floating orb of light hovering midway down the stairs. It was about the size of a baseball, constantly shifting between blue and violet. "What in God's name?" Marcus whispered. The orb pulsed once, twice, then shot upward, hovering at eye level between them. Officer Kim raised her weapon, but Marcus gently placed his hand on her arm. "Wait," he said softly. "I've seen this before." "Where?" Officer Kim asked, not taking her eyes off the orb. "In my dreams. For months now." As if responding to his words, the orb expanded slightly, projecting a series of symbols into the air between them. Strange, flowing characters that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Marcus stared at the symbols, a strange feeling of recognition washing over him. "I can almost understand it," he whispered. Officer Kim kept her weapon raised. "Sir, please step back. I don't think this is a burglary." The orb pulsed brighter, and more symbols appeared. Marcus felt a pressure in his head, like someone was trying to communicate directly with his mind. "They're scanning," he said, not knowing how he knew this. "They're looking for something." "Who is they?" Officer Kim asked, her voice steady despite the impossible situation. Before Marcus could answer, the orb suddenly expanded, enveloping the entire hallway in blue light. For a brief moment, Marcus saw strange figures moving in his basement, tall, slender shapes that were definitely not human. Then the light vanished, plunging them into darkness. When their eyes adjusted, the orb was gone. The basement door remained open, showing nothing but ordinary basement stairs and the concrete floor below. Officer Kim lowered her weapon slowly. "Mr. Johnson, I think we need specialists for this. This is beyond normal police work." Marcus nodded slowly, his hand unconsciously moving to touch the Marine Corps emblem on his old cap sitting on the side table. "I think you're right," he said quietly. "But whatever it is, it's been watching me. And I don't think it's just started." Officer Kim stood at the bottom of Marcus Johnson's basement stairs, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The blue light was gone now, but something had changed in the small concrete room. The air felt different, charged with an energy that made the small hairs on her arms stand up. "Stay at the top of the stairs, Mr. Johnson," she called over her shoulder. "With all due respect, officer," Marcus replied as he carefully made his way down, gripping the railing tightly. "I faced worse than whatever this is in the jungles of Vietnam." Kim didn't argue. There was something about the old veteran's calmness that was reassuring in this impossible situation. Her flashlight beam swept across the basement walls, illuminating old shelving units filled with neatly organized tools, boxes of Christmas decorations, and various household items. Nothing seemed out of place until the light reached the far corner of the room. "Mr. Johnson, was that wall always like that?" In the corner, what should have been a normal concrete wall now appeared to shimmer like the surface of water. The gray concrete seemed to ripple and move as if it were liquid. "No," Marcus said simply. "That ain't right at all." Officer Kim approached cautiously, her hand resting on her weapon. As she got closer, she could see that the wall wasn't just moving, it was transforming. Small metallic nodes had emerged from the concrete, forming a precise geometric pattern about 3 feet in diameter. "I need to call this in," Kim said, reaching for her radio again. It responded with nothing but static. Her phone still showed only strange, shifting patterns on its screen. Marcus moved to stand beside her, his eyes fixed on the strange formation. "I've drawn this," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" "In my sketchbook. I've been having these dreams for months now. Strange dreams that didn't make any sense. When I woke up, I'd draw what I saw. Without taking her eyes off the wall, Kim asked, "Can you show me these drawings?" "They're upstairs. But I don't think we need them now. We're seeing the real thing." As if responding to his words, the metallic nodes in the wall began to pulse with the same blue light they had seen earlier. The concrete between the nodes seemed to dissolve, revealing a dark space beyond. Not the earth one would expect behind a basement wall, but what appeared to be an enclosed chamber. From this chamber, a smooth oval device about the size of a football emerged. It hovered in the air between them, covered in symbols similar to what the orb had projected earlier. Officer Kim took a step back, drawing her weapon. "Sir, please move back." Marcus didn't move. He was staring at the device with an expression not of fear, but of recognition. "I know what this is," he said softly. "They've been in my head for months." The device rotated slowly in the air, scanning them with a thin beam of blue light. When the beam passed over Marcus, it intensified and widened, enveloping his entire body for a brief moment. Marcus gasped, his eyes widening. "They're looking for information. Military information. Who are they, Mr. Johnson?" Kim asked, her voice steady despite the impossible situation before them. "Not from here," he replied simply. "Not from Earth." The device completed its scan of Marcus and turned its attention to Officer Kim. As the blue light washed over her, she felt a strange pressure in her mind. Not painful, but invasive, as if something was rifling through her memories and thoughts. "They're interested in authority figures," Marcus said, watching the device. "Military, police, government. They want to understand our command structures." The device finished its scan and retreated slightly, hovering between them. A compartment opened on its surface, and a small projection appeared in the air, a three-dimensional map of their town, with certain buildings highlighted. The police station, Kim recognized immediately. The mayor's office. The National Guard Armory. Marcus pointed to another highlighted location. The VA hospital, where all the veterans go. The device closed the projection and began to emit a low hum. The air around it shimmered, and for a brief moment, both Marcus and Kim saw a glimpse of something else, a control room of some kind, with tall, slender figures moving around consoles made of the same metallic material as the device. Then the vision was gone, and the device retreated back toward the wall. But instead of disappearing, it stopped and hovered expectantly. "I think it wants us to follow," Marcus said. "That's not happening," Kim replied firmly, her weapon still trained on the device. The device emitted a series of rapid pulses, and more symbols appeared in the air between them. Marcus stared at the symbols, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I can almost understand them. It's like they're in my head somehow. They've been putting information in my mind while I sleep." "What are they saying?" "Something about preparation, evaluation. They're assessing us." "For what?" Marcus's face darkened. "I don't think we'd like the answer." The device pulsed again, this time projecting what appeared to be a timeline. Strange symbols flowed along its length, but near the end, there was an unmistakable image, Earth, surrounded by objects that could only be spacecraft. "My God," Kim whispered. "Is that what I think it is?" Marcus nodded grimly. "Looks like an invasion plan to me." The projection disappeared, and the device retreated further toward the wall. The opening began to close, the metallic nodes retracting back into the concrete. "Wait," Marcus called out suddenly. He stepped forward, addressing the device directly. "Why me? Why are you in my head?" The device paused. New symbols appeared, flowing and shifting. "Combat experience," Marcus translated slowly. "They're studying how we fight. Our tactics, our strategies." He looked at Officer Kim. "They've been scanning veterans, people who know warfare." The device pulsed one final time, then retreated fully into the wall. The opening sealed itself, the concrete reforming until there was no sign it had ever been disturbed. For a long moment, Marcus and Officer Kim stood in silence, staring at the now ordinary basement wall. "We need to tell someone about this," Kim finally said. "Who would believe us?" Marcus asked. "An old black veteran and a rookie cop claiming aliens are planning an invasion. I recorded it," Kim said, holding up her body camera. "At least I hope I did." They moved back upstairs to check the footage. On Kim's laptop, the video played back, showing nothing but static and distortion whenever the device was in frame. "They're jamming our technology somehow," Kim said. Marcus moved to a drawer and pulled out a worn sketchbook. "But they can't jam this," he said, opening it to reveal page after page of detailed drawings. The oval device, the symbols, the strange beings he had glimpsed. "Mr. Johnson," Kim said slowly, "I think you might be the most important person on the planet right now." Marcus looked down at his weathered hands. "Never thought I'd be called to serve my country again at my age," he said quietly. "But here we are." Marcus Johnson's modest home on Cedar Street had become the center of an operation unlike any in human history. 3 days had passed since Officer Kim discovered the alien probe in his basement. Now the living room was filled with equipment, computers, and people in uniforms and lab coats. Dr. Lee sat across from Marcus, studying the veteran's sketchbook with intense concentration. The doctor's eyes widened as he flipped through page after page of detailed drawings. "And you've been having these dreams for how long, Mr. Johnson?" Dr. Lee asked, adjusting his glasses. "About 3 months now," Marcus replied. "Started after my last VA hospital visit." Officer Kim stood nearby, watching their conversation. She had been assigned as the police liaison to the special government team that had taken over the case. "That matches our timeline," Dr. Lee said, looking up at his colleague Dr. Han, who was typing rapidly on a laptop. "The first signals were detected approximately 12 weeks ago." Dr. Han nodded without looking up. "And all targets have been military veterans, primarily those with combat experience." Marcus frowned. "Targets? There are others like me." Dr. Lee closed the sketchbook. "Yes, Mr. Johnson. We've identified 87 cases worldwide so far. Veterans from different conflicts, different countries, but all sharing the same experience. Unusual dreams followed by contact events." Officer Kim moved closer. "Why veterans? Why Mr. Johnson?" Dr. Han finally looked up from her computer. "We believe they're gathering tactical information, combat experience, military strategy, weapons capabilities. They're studying how we fight," Marcus said quietly. "That's what the device told me." Dr. Lee and Dr. Han exchanged glances. "You understood the device's communication?" Dr. Lee asked carefully. "Not exactly," Marcus replied. "It's more like feelings, ideas that pop into my head when I see those symbols." Dr. Han turned her laptop around to show a series of photographs. "Like these symbols." Marcus leaned forward, studying the images. They showed similar metallic nodes and devices found in basements, attics, and garages of homes around the world. "Yes," he confirmed, "though some of these look different. More advanced, maybe." A commotion at the front door interrupted them. A tall military officer entered, followed by 2 aides carrying metal cases. The room fell silent as he approached. "Colonel Park," Dr. Lee said, standing to greet him. "Thank you for coming so quickly." The colonel nodded curtly. "The situation has escalated. We need to move faster." He turned to Marcus, studying the elderly veteran with evaluating eyes. "Mr. Johnson, I'm Colonel Park, Joint Special Operations Command. We need your help." Marcus straightened in his chair, his military bearing returning instinctively. "How can I help, Colonel?" Colonel Park motioned to one of his aides, who opened a metal case on the coffee table. Inside was a device that looked similar to the alien probe, but clearly of human manufacture. "Our engineers have been studying the recovered devices," Colonel Park explained. "We've created this based on what we've learned. It's designed to tap into the same neural network the aliens have established with veterans like yourself." Marcus looked at the device skeptically. And what exactly would I be doing with this? Communicating, Colonel Park said simply. Or more accurately, listening. We need to understand their plans better. Officer Kim stepped forward. Is that safe? For Mr. Johnson, I mean. Dr. Han spoke up. We've run preliminary tests. The neural connection appears to be non-invasive, more like a shared dream state than direct brain manipulation. And if you're wrong, Officer Kim pressed. Colonel Park's face remained impassive. Time is a luxury we don't have. Officer Kim, our satellites have detected unusual activity in orbit. We believe the main force is approaching. Marcus stared at the device. After a moment, he nodded slowly. Let's do it. Within an hour, the living room had been transformed into a makeshift command center. Marcus sat in his armchair, electrodes attached to his temples. The human-made device sat on the table before him, humming softly. We'll monitor your brain activity throughout, Dr. Han explained as she checked the connections. If we detect any unusual patterns, we'll pull you out immediately. Marcus nodded, his eyes fixed on the device. What do I do? Just relax, Dr. Lee said. Let your mind open to the connection. Based on what we've observed, they've already established a pathway to your thoughts. We're just hitching a ride. Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of equipment. At first, nothing happened. Then Marcus felt it, a familiar pressure in his mind, like someone gently knocking on a door. Instead of resisting as he had before, he welcomed it, opening his thoughts. Images flooded his mind. Stars, planets, ships moving through the darkness of space, maps of Earth, overlaid with glowing points of light, the locations of the probes. They're coming, Marcus whispered, his eyes still closed. A fleet, 7 large vessels, smaller craft inside them. Dr. Han typed frantically, recording every word. Timeline? Colonel Park asked tensely. Soon, Marcus replied. Very soon. The probes are the first stage, gathering information before the main force arrives. The images in his mind shifted, showing strange beings moving through simulated human environments, practicing, preparing. They're studying us, Marcus continued. Our tactics, our weapons, our command structures. They think they understand how we fight. A new image appeared in his mind. A battlefield. Human soldiers moving in formation, exactly as military doctrine would dictate. Then alien weapons firing, exploiting the predictable patterns. Marcus's eyes snapped open. But they're wrong. Everyone in the room startled at his sudden outburst. What do you mean, they're wrong? Colonel Park asked. Marcus sat forward eagerly. They've studied our formal military tactics, our training manuals, our standard operations. But that's not how humans really fight, especially when our backs are against the wall. Officer Kim nodded slowly, understanding dawning. They're missing the human element. Exactly, Marcus said. In Vietnam, nothing went according to the manuals. We adapted, improvised, did the unexpected. He looked around the room, his eyes bright with realization. That's why they picked veterans. They wanted to understand our experience, not just our training. But they don't understand what they're seeing. Colonel Park's stern expression softened slightly. You're saying their intelligence on us is flawed. Fundamentally, Marcus confirmed. They think we're predictable, methodical, that we always follow protocols. He laughed softly. Anyone who's been in real combat knows that's not true. Dr. Lee looked thoughtful. Could we use this misunderstanding against them? Maybe, Marcus said, but we need to know more. And we need to find the other veterans they've contacted. Together, we might see the full picture. Colonel Park nodded decisively. We'll arrange transport for you to our main facility immediately, Mr. Johnson. We've already gathered several others there. As the room buzzed with renewed activity, Officer Kim moved to Marcus's side. Are you okay with all this? She asked quietly. Marcus looked around at the scientists, soldiers, and equipment filling his small living room. Then he touched the Marine Corps pin on his collar. "Never thought I'd be called to serve again at my age," he said with a small smile. "But if these aliens want to learn about human warfare, I think it's time we gave them a proper education." The military compound bustled with activity as Marcus Johnson sat at the center of a large conference table. Around him were 12 other veterans, men and women of different ages, races, and backgrounds. What united them was their shared experience. All had been contacted by the alien probes. "I still can't believe I'm not crazy," said an elderly woman named Lee, who had served as an Army nurse in Desert Storm. "For months I thought I was losing my mind." Marcus nodded sympathetically. "We all did, but now we know better." Colonel Park stood at the head of the table, his uniform crisp and his posture rigid. Behind him, a large screen displayed a map of the world with glowing dots marking probe locations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Colonel Park began, "you are now part of Operation Sentinel. Your unique neural connections to the alien network make you our most valuable assets." Officer Kim stood near the door, still serving as liaison between the police and military forces. She caught Marcus's eye and gave him a small encouraging nod. "The situation has escalated," Colonel Park continued. "Our deep space monitoring stations have confirmed 7 large vessels approaching Earth. They will arrive in approximately 72 hours. A murmur ran through the group of veterans. "So what's the plan?" asked Garcia, a former Navy SEAL with gray at his temples. "You said our connections make us valuable. How?" Dr. Han stepped forward, her lab coat exchanged for more practical attire. "We've developed technology that can amplify and redirect the neural patterns the aliens have been collecting from you." She pointed to the devices on the table, more refined versions of the one Marcus had used in his living room. "We believe we can use these connections to feed false information back to the aliens," Dr. Han explained, "essentially poisoning their intelligence about human military capabilities." Marcus leaned forward. "You want to trick them?" "Precisely," Colonel Park confirmed. "Dr. Han, please continue." Dr. Han activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed a 3D model of human brain patterns. "The aliens have been specifically studying how you think during combat situations," she explained. "Your tactical decision-making, your responses to threats. But as Mr. Johnson pointed out, they've fundamentally misunderstood human warfare." Officer Kim spoke up from her position by the door. "They think we're predictable, but humans are anything but, especially in combat." "Exactly," Dr. Han agreed. "And that's our advantage. We're going to use your minds to create chaos in their systems." The veterans exchanged glances, a mix of confusion and intrigue on their faces. "How exactly do we do that?" asked Lee. Dr. Park joined the presentation, bringing up images of the alien symbols. "By thinking in ways they can't anticipate. By feeding them conflicting, chaotic thought patterns that defy the logical systems they're built on." Marcus laughed softly. "So you want us to think like humans?" "Yes," Dr. Park smiled, "as unpredictably and creatively as possible." Colonel Park cleared his throat. "We've designated this as Operation Jazz." Garcia raised an eyebrow. "Jazz?" "Mr. Johnson's suggestion," Colonel Park explained. "Improvisation within structure. Unpredictable yet harmonious. The aliens understand our notes, but not our music." For the next 48 hours, the veterans worked with the scientists to develop their strategy. They were connected to the devices in controlled sessions, each time projecting different tactical scenarios into the alien network. Marcus found himself in a white room with Dr. Han, electrodes attached to his temples, and the device humming on a table between them. "Today, I want you to focus on jungle warfare in Vietnam," Dr. Han instructed. "But specifically, think about times when standard tactics failed and you had to improvise." Marcus closed his eyes. The memories came easily. The ambush near Kisan, where his unit had scattered and used bird calls to regroup. The time they'd rigged coconut shells as false targets to draw enemy fire. The night they'd painted their faces with mud to hide their heat signatures from early thermal scopes. As he projected these memories into the connection, Marcus could feel a response. Confusion, recalculation, adjustment. The alien intelligence was trying to make sense of tactics that defied their understanding of human warfare. "They're responding," Marcus said, eyes still closed. "They're trying to adapt their models." Dr. Han watched the readings on her tablet. "Good. Keep going." Across the facility, other veterans were doing the same, projecting memories of adaptive, improvised combat from wars throughout history. The Korean War, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Afghanistan, Iraq. Each conflict had forced human soldiers to adapt in ways no training manual could predict. By the third day, they could see the results. The alien probes in homes around the world began to malfunction, sending conflicting data back to the approaching fleet. Officer Kim found Marcus in the facility cafeteria, stirring a cup of coffee absently. "How are you holding up?" she asked, sitting across from him. "Tired," he admitted, "but I think it's working. Every time we feed them these chaotic patterns, I can feel their confusion." Officer Kim nodded. "The Global Task Force reports that probe activity is decreasing worldwide. They're starting to shut down. That's good news, right?" "Maybe," she said cautiously. "Or they're switching tactics." As if on cue, alarms began to sound throughout the facility. Colonel Park's voice came over the speakers. "All personnel to stations. Operation Jazz entering final phase." Marcus and Officer Kim hurried to the command center. The large screen now showed the 7 alien vessels in Earth orbit. "They've arrived early," Colonel Park announced as they entered, "and they're deploying smaller craft." Dr. Han looked up from her console. "The neural network is experiencing massive activity spikes. They're scanning globally." Colonel Park turned to the assembled veterans. "This is it, the decisive moment. We need all of you connected at once, projecting maximum chaos into their systems." Within minutes, the veterans were positioned around the room, each connected to a device. Medical staff monitored their vital signs while technicians adjusted the equipment. "On my mark," Colonel Park said. 3, 2, 1. Commence Operation Jazz." Marcus closed his eyes and opened his mind fully to the connection. This time, he didn't focus on specific memories, but on the essence of human unpredictability itself. The creative problem-solving that had defined his military service. The intuitive leaps that no alien intelligence could model. Around him, he could sense the other veterans doing the same, their minds joining in a chaotic symphony of human thought. Through the connection, he could feel the alien intelligence struggling to process the contradictory information flooding its network. On the main screen, the smaller alien craft began to move erratically. Some returned to the motherships. Others drifted aimlessly in orbit. "It's working," Dr. Han announced, her voice tight with excitement. "Their systems can't handle the paradoxes we're feeding them." Marcus pushed harder, drawing on his deepest reserves of memory and experience. Through the neural link, he sent one clear message: humans cannot be predicted. Humans cannot be modeled. Humans will always find a way. The alien ships began to retreat. Marcus Johnson stood on the observation deck of the military facility, watching the night sky through the large glass windows. Around him, scientists and military personnel monitored screens and equipment, but his eyes remained fixed on the stars above. Somewhere up there, 7 massive alien ships were now moving away from Earth, retreating into the darkness of space. "They're really leaving," Officer Kim said, joining him at the window. In the week since Operation Jazz had begun, she had barely left the facility, serving as the main link between local law enforcement and the military operation. "For now," Marcus replied softly, "but they'll be back. Wiser next time." Colonel Park approached them, his usual stern expression softened slightly by exhaustion and relief. "The last of their ships has passed Mars orbit. Deep space tracking confirms they're on a trajectory out of our solar system." Marcus nodded but didn't comment. The victory felt incomplete to him somehow. Mr. Johnson, Colonel Park continued, I wanted to thank you personally. Your insights were crucial to our success. Not just me, Marcus said. All of us veterans. We all contributed. Yes, but you were the first to understand what they were doing wrong. Their fundamental misunderstanding of human nature. Officer Kim smiled. They thought we would follow the rulebook, even when facing extinction. No species that survived this long ever got by on just following rules, Marcus said. Adaptation is what keeps us alive. Always has been. The three of them stood in silence for a moment, watching the stars. Finally, Colonel Park spoke again. The President will be making an announcement tomorrow. A limited disclosure about what happened. Marcus raised an eyebrow. How limited? The public will be told that we detected and repelled an extraterrestrial reconnaissance mission, Colonel Park explained. No details about the neural connections or the probes. Those will remain classified. People deserve to know the truth, Officer Kim said firmly. Colonel Park sighed. Perhaps. But right now, the world needs stability, not panic. And the truth is, we need time to prepare for their return. 3 months later, Marcus sat on his front porch, watching the neighborhood children playing in the street. His house on Cedar Street looked the same as always from the outside, but the basement had been transformed into a secure monitoring station, staffed around the clock by military personnel. Similar stations had been established in the homes of all the veterans who had been contacted. The neural connections remained, though dormant now, like radio receivers waiting for a signal. Officer Kim's police cruiser pulled up to the curb. She had been promoted after the incident but still made time to visit Marcus regularly. Beautiful day, she said, joining him on the porch. Every day above ground is a beautiful day, Marcus replied with a smile. Kim handed him a small package. Dr. Han sent this for you. The new neural amplifier. Smaller than the old one. Marcus took the box but didn't open it. Any news from the others? Lee in Arizona had a dream last night. Nothing concrete, just impressions. They're still out there, still watching. Marcus nodded. He had experienced similar dreams. Fragmented images of stars and ships and strange beings studying human history. The defense network is coming along, Kim continued. 30 countries have joined the coalition now. Everyone's contributing resources, technology, and the veteran program. Growing every day. We've identified over 2,000 worldwide who show signs of the neural connection. Most didn't even know they had it. Marcus looked up at the clear blue sky. I never thought I'd serve again at my age. You never stopped serving, Mr. Johnson, Kim said respectfully. A group of officials in dark suits approached the house. Marcus recognized Dr. Han among them, along with several military officers he hadn't met before. Mr. Johnson, Dr. Han called out as they reached the porch. I hope we're not interrupting. Not at all, Marcus replied. What brings you all here today? A tall woman in an Air Force uniform stepped forward. Mr. Johnson, I'm General Choi. I've been appointed to lead the new Sentinel Defense Initiative. We need your help. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Again. Still, General Choi corrected with a small smile. Your neural connection is the strongest we found, and your military experience gives you insights others lack. What exactly are you asking of him? Officer Kim asked protectively. We're establishing a global early warning system, Dr. Han explained, using the neural network the aliens created against them. The veterans with the strongest connections will serve as our frontline sensors. Living radar stations, Marcus said dryly. More than that, General Choi countered. Strategic advisors, teachers, the aliens studied you to learn how humans fight. Now we need you to teach us what they learned and what they missed. Marcus looked at the gathered officials, then at Officer Kim, who gave him an encouraging nod. I've been having dreams, he admitted. They're different now. I can see them more clearly. They're preparing something new. The officials exchanged concerned glances. Tell us, General Choi urged. They're adapting, Marcus said, learning from their mistake. Next time, they won't underestimate our unpredictability. They'll try to use it against us. Dr. Han leaned forward. How long do we have? Marcus closed his eyes, reaching for the impressions that had filtered through his dreams. Years, not months. They're being more careful this time. More thorough. Then we have time to prepare, General Choi said with determination. Yes, Marcus agreed, opening his eyes. And we'll need every minute of it. 1 year later, Marcus stood before a classroom of young military officers at the newly established Sentinel Academy. Behind him, a screen displayed the alien symbols that had once appeared in his basement. The first thing you need to understand, he told the attentive students, is that they thought they knew us, but they only saw our surface. They studied our tactics, our technology, our military doctrine. What they failed to grasp was our spirit. Officer Kim, now Captain Kim, and the Academy's liaison with global law enforcement, watched from the back of the room with pride. Humanity has faced existential threats throughout our history, Marcus continued. Wars, plagues, natural disasters. Each time, we survived not because we were stronger or smarter than what threatened us, but because we refused to be predictable. We adapted. We improvised. We evolved. He pointed to the alien symbols. They thought they were studying our weaknesses. Instead, they revealed their own. As he spoke, Marcus felt a familiar sensation in his mind. A distant watching, a presence observing through the dormant neural connection. He didn't fight it. Instead, he projected his thoughts clearly, knowing they would be received. We know you're coming back. And this time, we'll be ready. That night, Marcus sat on his porch, looking up at the stars. Captain Kim joined him, bringing 2 cups of coffee. Do you think they can hear us? She asked, following his gaze upward. I know they can, Marcus replied with quiet confidence. And that's good. I want them to understand what they're facing. Which is? Marcus smiled, his weathered face peaceful in the starlight. The most unpredictable, adaptable, stubborn species in the galaxy. A species that turns invasion into opportunity. A species that learns from every challenge. He took a sip of his coffee and added, they came looking for our weaknesses. Instead, they helped us find our greatest strength. Above them, the stars continued their eternal watch, silent witnesses to humanity's unexpected victory and its continuing preparation for the challenges yet to come.